And we are back on the 0 Hour. Joining us now is a good friend of the program. We're always delighted to have her. Linda Tirado is the author of the new book, Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America. Linda, thanks for joining us.
Hey, RJ, glad to be back.
Yeah, glad to have you. Listen, I've been spending the whole show trying to look at this election from a slightly different lens, and maybe you can share that with me. I come from a weird background. On my father's side, it was like New York Jewish intellectuals on that, but I misbehaved when I grew up, and I got sent to my mother's sister, who was a Southern Baptist, married to a Texan, and that's how I found out I was an unwanted child, by the way. He had too much to drink one night and pointed that out to me. But anyway, so I've been trying to look at this from the point of view of like not a Democrat, not a political operative, not any of those things that most people on TV have been talking about, but just why would people do this? Because I come from the place that nobody's irrational, that people have their own reasons for doing things, and that it's insulting and stupid to assume that you know more than they do, but at least about their own lives. But I don't know. What do you think? What did you think of this election?
I mean, I think that when you've got ridiculously low turnout like we've had, that in and of itself is a message, right? Like, you've got this many people that feel so disenfranchised that they're not even bothering to turn out, knowing that the people who are very hardcore activists are going to be turning out. I talked to a lot of my friends and said, hey, did you go vote? And a lot of them said no. And when I asked them why, they said that they really didn't see any candidates that they felt particularly were going to be helpful to them. There weren't any huge hot-button social issues being voted on, and we saw turnout be higher in the places that you had referendums that were fairly divisive. But overall, man, I just think the candidates weren't there. We didn't have anybody necessarily out front making an affirmative case for, populism that was up for election. That wasn't a theme through this election. What the theme was, do you like Barack Obama or not? And it turned into a giant political fight between a bunch of talking heads over what the election was going to be a referendum on. And when that's the discussion, when the discussion is what is the election going to mean and not what the election actually is supposed to mean, you're not going to have a whole lot of interest.
Yeah, the jobs numbers came out this week. I think that's really well said. The jobs numbers came out this week and everybody cheered because, they were nowhere near enough to dig us out of the hole we're in, but they were better than they had been. But then you open them up and you see, like, okay, a few more restaurant jobs.
Right.
It's kind of, it's so hard to get by now that
we still don't feel it. Exactly.
Exactly. And that's my point. So what you're saying kind of tracks with what I'm saying, which is it's anything but irrational. If you're not talking about, hey, we're going to make it better and here's how, why vote? I'm not defending not voting, but I'm saying I understand it. Don't you think that's a fair statement?
I would say that I understand it, and more, I would defend it. I would say that it's an affirmative political statement that this is not working, that we will not pick the worst of two options. How many years have Americans been saying, I'm tired of picking the worst or even worser, right? And now we're starting to see people actually follow that up and just refuse to participate in that system. And I hear that more and more frequently where people are making this, look, political activism and political engagement goes so much further than voting. People are taking their resources and their time and their energy and they're putting them into developing community centers and doing things for ourselves because we do not trust the government to do it for us. But there's a finite amount of civic time you have to devote. If you're working class, you've got two jobs. People are taking their time and putting it into things that they know will make a difference. And increasingly, I think people just don't see our political system as a thing that's going to make an affirmative difference in their lives. We vote so that we maybe go to war or don't, but we do not vote so that we get our community centers. That is not an effective way to get the community centers.
So here's an idea that I heard last week, and I want to run it by you because I kind of like it. And the idea is not only to have and I've heard this one before, but, include a none of the above on every election column, but also to say, if you lose out on the none of the above, if it's like, you name it, Joni Ernst and Braley, and none of the above wins, then neither of those candidates gets to run again. You're out, man. If the majority of the public rejects you, the parties have got to come up with somebody else and keep coming up with somebody else until they get somebody that a majority of the public actually wants. What do you think of that idea?
I would probably tweak that just a bit. I would put the none of the above option up, and I would say that if none of the above wins, then you have to have another election, and you have to put different candidates up that cycle. I would let candidates keep running. I would let them take that message. I mean, we just elected another dead guy, right? Like, this happens at least once a cycle in America. And when I was in high school, Michael Moore did that little stunt thing where they elected a ficus in Texas, right? But we have been electing dead people ever since. If that's not a message from the voters, I don't know what is.
Right. In 1968, I think it was, the Yippies, the Yippies group ran Nobody. They named a pig Nobody, and they ran the pig for Nobody. And I remember, because a guy I got to be friends with later came up with all his slogans. Nobody knows what you want. Nobody cares. Nobody loves you, and nobody knows you when you're down and out, where their electoral campaign. But, getting back to this, I guess, what do you think are Linda Tirado, author of Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America? You mentioned community centers, and you mentioned people getting involved in improving their own lives. And I think that's right on the money. But beyond that, if you think about elections, and forget, whether it's Democrat, independent, just people running for office, getting back to that, since that's in the news this week. What do you think, if you had to pick 3 or 4 issues that made people feel, yeah, this person understands me and wants to help me? What do you think are 3 or 4 things people could say and promise and actually do to make people respond?
I think if I saw a candidate promise to bring up actual welfare reform, and not reform the way we talk about it, where reform stands in for cuts in services, but actually making the system make sense, that would draw votes. If we talked about, simplifying the tax code, and by that I don't mean going to a flat tax or something that's, largely going to benefit the upper scale of the tax brackets, but actually simplifying it so that we didn't have to spend $75 going to H&R Block just to file really simple taxes, I think you'd see a lot of movement around that candidate. If we could find a candidate who talked about things like subsidies and the reason that our food is so expensive and promised to bring that to national attention, I think you'd find a lot of people backing that candidate. And I think that if you had somebody talking about things like, in World War II, we actually had socialized daycare. We had government-run daycare centers for the wives of the soldiers who now suddenly had to find work, because we understood that single parenthood, and moreover working parenthood, was an unnecessary burden on a lot of families. And we started talking about how to expand our education systems and our daycare systems to make them equally accessible to people with not so much means. You would find people come out in droves for that candidate. Our issues are not hard to identify, and the practical solutions are not hard to come up with. What we lack is the candidates or the political will to ever actually discuss them. I think if you had somebody who came up, not somebody who was funded by, large corporations, not somebody whose name we'd heard of, and the trouble that we have in the system is you need the money and you need the name recognition. But if you had somebody that came up from the bottom and could say, look, these are the actual structural problems, like the day-to-day problems that most people face. Let's talk about those. You would find amazing turnout for that candidate. And we just rarely see that.
Yeah, that's
often,
really interesting.
I think we see people pretend to do that. People come out and vote for those people, and then they get, completely disenfranchised, because as soon as they get into office, let's talk about whatever it is that's on the agenda. So,
The deficit.
Right.
We're talking with Linda Tirado. So what? And let me ask you too, your opinion on. Okay, one of my big issues is jobs. I mean, I'm just like, it's the jobs, stupid. Every time I hear anything, economic report, new proposal, no, get us some freaking jobs. I mean, this is what people need. Let us get good paying jobs, like where employers actually can't treat you like dirt anymore, because if you quit, they're going to have a hard time filling the position. That get us moving in that direction. I guess what I struggle with is, obviously, first of all, Democrats, I think a lot of them aren't sincere about that. They don't really fight for that. And that's one of the reasons they lose. But another is, how to talk about it in a way that connects with people.
Right
You know,
now, we give money to corporations to send jobs overseas. Like, they
right.
actually get tax benefits for doing that. All you have to say is, we will give a company tax benefits for producing good paying jobs that stay in the States. That's it. That's the only solution we need. Instead of giving the money to hurt American workers, we will give the money to help American workers. That is the end of the campaign slogan. That's all you have to say. It's not rocket science.
Right. It's really not. And by the way, that's exactly what Paul Krugman said when I had him on the show, when I was talking about, create job creation. He kept saying it's not rocket science that, there have been a bunch of recessions. First of all, there was the Great Depression. We know how to create jobs after that. There've been a bunch of recessions since then until Washington changed because of corporate money. Yeah, people knew what to do. If there's a recession, if there's a downturn, you infuse some money into the economy, you create some government jobs. We got a lot of bridges that need building or rebuilding and so on. You get people back to work. You give it a jump start. We know how to give the economy a jump start. So a quick change of subject for you, Linda Tirado, author of Hand to Mouth. Is it true you got a new media appearance coming up?
I do. I'm going to be on Bill Maher tonight. I'm actually on the side of the road in Los Angeles. And that is hugely exciting. The other thing I'm actually more excited, though, I wrote an article for The Guardian about kind of the difference between the U.S. and the U.K. system. They only have had food banks since 2004 in Britain, which was hugely shocking to me. But I got the chance to interview a bunch of people who went and actually used food banks in Britain. And what was really funny to me is they talk about their system the exact same way we talk about ours. I spoke with this woman and she said, look, they keep trying to push us off welfare and make cuts and cuts and cuts to the program so that we'll go out and find jobs, but then there aren't any jobs to find. And they don't understand that. And it
exactly.
Go ahead. And it doesn't seem to matter where you are in the world. When we're talking about people who are marginalized, when we're talking about how to move our societies forward, it is a fight between the people who understand what it is like to live as a marginalized person and those folks who are just trying to kind of impose market-based, fixes from the top. And so the interesting thing about these midterms is we don't have any candidates who understand what life is like for half of America. We know that if we elect somebody, they're going to go to Congress, they're going to spend 4 hours a day dialing for dollars, and they're only going to work 150 days out of the year, and then they're going to complain that they're poor. Why would I go vote for that guy?
Right, because they only make, what is it now, $147,000 a year, and plus whatever, a little extra.
174, I think, isn't it?
Oh, is it 174? Yeah, it's probably going up. And plus the greatest benefits ever, and a retirement plan, and then they come out and say Social Security is too expensive and we got to cut it. No wonder people don't turn out to vote, and no wonder it's the challenge of the day to get political types to understand that it's a rational decision not to turn out to vote when the system works like that. And I'm delighted that I'm looking forward to the piece about food banks and the UK, because I've talked a lot about it. The UK, I've been over there too, and hopefully you'll come back and talk.
It's the same problems that we're facing here. It is a question of Western culture and society and what we value, and do we value the dollars more than we value the citizenry?
Right. And it's globalization, global financialization's control of all the world's governments, and we got to stay on them. So glad you're doing it. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us again. Linda Tirado, author of Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, RJ. Bye-bye.
Take care. And we will be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.